Welcome to Tuesday Talks. My name is Haley, and I am the event coordinator down here at Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium's International Center for Coral Reef Research and Restoration. In the past, our interviews have been done at our lab on Summerlin Key. As you can tell, I am not in our lab right now. We are practicing social distancing, so all of our interviews will be done virtually until further notice. Today, we are interviewing our coral reproduction technician, Cody Engelsma. He's got a lot of answers for you regarding coral babies and coral reproduction. So I hope we can answer some of your questions. Let's dive in.
Alrighty. Hello, I'm Cody Engelsma, and I'm a coral reproduction technician.
Perfect. Love that. Okay, so we're going to get into these questions. So you're a coral reproduction technician. What does it look like on a daily day-to-day basis for you?
So typically I come in, and so we have a bunch of raceways that I have my corals in. And so we keep those covered when we're not there, just in case it rains. So kind of the first thing I would do is uncover the raceways so that the corals can get some natural light. And then from there, it's mostly husbandry kind of stuff I do. So that involves siphoning the tanks out. We have snails that eat algae. So the snails poop a lot, so essentially we're siphoning out that poop so it doesn't build up. And then some other things are when a raceway gets too dirty, sometimes the snails can't keep up with the algae that's growing or their CCA growing in there. We'll actually move the corals into a new raceway and then completely wash that tank down. Some other things is just visual inspections of the corals. So just making sure that they are healthy, they're growing fine. And this is typically seen, like if I see skeleton, that means that there's some kind of recession.
Very nice. And earlier you had mentioned CCA. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you guys do with that?
Yeah. So crustose coralline algae is what CCA is. And it's kind of this purple algae that actually creates a calcareous surface or skeleton in a way. And typically we like to see that just because when it's growing, that means the environment's healthy. It'll grow on our plugs a lot that the corals are on, and sometimes it can outcompete the corals, and essentially, or especially since I work with baby corals, they grow a little bit slower than the corals that we microfrag. So it's really important that we mitigate by removing that CCA so that the corals can continue to grow better.
Gotcha. Cool. So what exactly is sexual propagation?
So sexual propagation is essentially taking the eggs and sperm from corals during spawning and crossing those to get new genetically distinct corals. So a lot of what we do here at the lab is asexual propagation, where we're microfragging, we're taking one genotype and cutting it into many pieces. Asexual or sexual propagation is where we're trying to get more unique individuals genetically, and that involves coral spawning, where we actually cross the eggs and the sperm that we collect from certain corals, whether we bring those corals in from the reef or we actually go out on the reef and collect those. But we essentially do that to increase our diversity because asexual propagation doesn't increase that. We just increase our numbers.
So when you go out to the reef to collect all that, what kind of techniques do you guys use?
So when we're actually collecting the corals, we have some spawning nurseries for Acroporus rivicornis or staghorn. And we also just set up a elkhorn coral spawning nursery. So we have some spawning trees that it's essentially a PVC trunk, and then it has fiberglass rods that go like this, and we hang the corals off of those. And that allows them to grow really large. And then we'll take those corals after they're a certain size, and we would actually break off a branch of those to see if it's gravid or pregnant, essentially. It has the gamete bundles inside its polyps. And so we take corals that we know are gravid, we bring them into the lab, about a week or two in it before spawning happens, just so that we can monitor them and then get them on a profile that's similar to what they'd experience out on the reef. And then once it's actually spawning time, which is about anywhere from about a week.
So, how did you get into coral reproduction?
So, I mean, I went to college for marine biology. So I was just studying very broad. I was actually more interested in fish. But as I was studying, I really became very interested in coral reefs and how important they are and that kind of stuff. So I kind of, like every project I ever did, it was on coral reefs and how important they are and that kind of stuff. And then I was kind of looking for an internship to get into coral restoration, actually. And so I applied here at Moat, and I started off in coral restoration, which is probably the best way to get into this field since it's very new and not many places do coral reproduction. But I started off in coral restoration, and I ended up showing interest in coral spawning. And the guy here, Chris Page, who was in charge of it at the time, ended up needing some help. So I volunteered to help him out with raising his coral babies.
Yeah, and then the growth progression, you monitor,
Very
yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
yeah, you monitor the growth. Like that's part of what your job is, right? You take pictures is it every day you take pictures of the corals or?
So I have certain corals I take a picture of once a week. I'd love to do it more, but I try to line up the photos like exactly with the previous photo that I took, which can take a long time. So I only have about 4 or 5 corals I do that for, but
Okay.
it just shows that progression over time. So when they first settle, they're all white. And then as that progresses, they slowly take up their zoops or their zooxanthellae. And then from there, they just start growing super fast. And it's super cool to see and just document it. And then you put all those pictures together into a little video, and it's really cool.
It is really cool. Have you found that different species grow at different rates, or are you just taking pictures of all the same species?
So this year I just have Acropora cervicornis, which is staghorn, and then Orbicella fabulata, which is mountainous star coral.
So it seems like they're pretty sensitive to their environment when they're babies.
Yeah. And that's one thing we're trying to figure out is like, we have a mixture of canal water and well water here. And so we can use both. So last year we started using canal and well water as a mixture. Before we used to just use well water. And that seemed to work well with the acroporids, whereas Orbicella fabulata just didn't like it, it seems. So we're going to try to switch back to just well water, see if that works.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And that's the hard thing is like, so a lot of people who are doing this research, we work together, but when it comes to water quality, each place has something that's a little bit different. So just because one thing works at one place doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work somewhere else. So theoretically, a coral doesn't need food. It gets most of its energy from the zooxanthellae that lives inside of it, or zooxanthellae is an algae, and so that algae photosynthesizes and gives nutrients to the corals. So theoretically speaking, and they shouldn't need it. I mean, they will pull in some nutrients from the water, but like with most of our other corals, we won't feed them. But with the babies, I mean, it seems to be beneficial, whether they're just not getting enough energy from their zooxanthellae or they're just missing a key nutrient that they aren't getting from them or from the water. So feeding them is helpful. And then if anything, feeding just may help promote faster growth. So that's definitely something I've implemented now is just feeding the babies, get them to grow faster, because the sooner we can get them to full size, we can start fragging them and then putting them into coral reproduction. So
what corals do we have on site that that y'all spawn? Is it the 3 big ones that are out there in the outdoor raceway?
So I mean, we do have those. We're trying to settle them, but so the main corals we work with are Acropora cervicornis and Acropora palmata, just because they're the fastest growing, they're the fastest to get to sexually mature. We do have some boulders on site, Pseudodiploria clivosa, which is knobby brain coral, and then Orbicella fabulata.
So at the moment, how many baby corals are you caring for?
So the corals that we have this year, I have about, let's see here, 100. So that's a combination of our staghorn and mountainous star coral. But a total of all the corals I take care of, which is mostly from last year and this year, so they're all sexual recruits. It's about 2,600 corals.
2,600 of last year and this year altogether?
But so
that's a lot.
Technically, it'd only be around 700-800 corals, but we started actually fragging corals now, so we have duplicates of some genotypes, so that's why I have so many. And especially since we're getting ready for an experiment with some of our corals, I have 3 or 4 duplicates of them. So as for getting into this field, honestly, it's kind of hard, especially since it's very new. The best way to get into it, though, is to find someone who's doing coral restoration, and then from there, typically, well, not typically, gosh, how do I put it? It's so hard because not everyone does exactly what we do. We have like every single step, whereas some people just do coral restoration, some just do spawning.
Yeah, some moat really goes through the sexual propagation to the care, to the fragging, to the outplanting, and full circle all again, right?
Yeah. So not everywhere does that, so getting into reproduction is kind of hard. So the best thing I would say is to start with coral restoration, and then from there you have experience with coral husbandry, which raising recruits is a lot harder because they're a lot more sensitive, but it's easier to go into that from coral restoration than just stepping right into coral spawning. So
alrighty, well, I think that is it for today. Thanks, Cody, for spending time with us.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. So
yeah. Well, everyone, that is it for today. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I think what he's doing is so cool. If you did like the video, you can go to our Facebook page and like us, or you could find us on Instagram and follow us there. We put out coral content all the time.